Man, I love talking to Fuhrman. But for you, if you just joined the show, and for Fuhrman, I don't know if Rockstar told him, but this is Rockstar's last day on the show. We've known for a couple of weeks. He's making the big announcement today and riding off into the sunset to bigger and brighter things. But I've always loved watching Rockstar and Fuhrman. Of all the guests, it seems like, Rockstar, you have the longest conversations with Fuhrman. It's pretty close.
Fuhrman's one of the good ones. He's one of those guys that he engages, and it's fun to mess with and hear him complain that it's 10:08.
It's only 10:04 today.
It's only 10:04 today. We're ahead of schedule. We're ahead of schedule. Let's bring Fuhrman in. Fuhrman, so you and Rockstar, you have conversations while you're waiting on me to finally get to you, right?
We do. There's no doubt about it. We have a chance to talk about the week that was, all the topics that we should be hitting during this segment that we know you're not going to let us get to, Dunaway. So it's what goes on behind the scenes that really is the fabric of a good radio show. And I'm legitimately concerned for the three of you. Without Rockstar to hold you guys together, I'm not sure what's going to become of these Friday
never make it. Never make it.
I would say look at the Patriots without Tom Brady. It has not been good. It has not been good.
Hey, so you gave me some news this morning. Let's start before we look at this week's game. Looking at a next week game, you texted me this morning and said, by the way, Circus Sports opened Alabama, Georgia as a pick'em, which I had seen estimations of 4.5, 5.5. You said you thought it might come somewhere around 2.5. I think you said the same.
2.5, Georgia 2.5.
FanDuel does have it at 2.5.
I am a little surprised.
But the first one officially in the game, Fuhrman, you said, was Circus Sports at a pick.
Yep, and they'll take bigger limits than some of the other books that are out there, so they feel comfortable putting the number out there now, knowing that neither of these teams will be in action tomorrow with the rest of the college football landscape. So I'm as curious as you guys to see where this number goes. The other thing that I'll add, Brownie, I actually think, like we talked about, the worst thing to happen to Alabama was Georgia getting their wake-up call against Kentucky and Lexington going into the bye. Because if this team was too busy reading their own press clippings, thinking they could just show up and roll over the competition, that was the perfect strategy for Kirby to get this team refocused, now to get them locked in and engaged for what should be a tremendous matchup next week against an Alabama team that featured explosive plays aplenty against Wisconsin, but still has struggled down to down moving the football, albeit in wins against Wisconsin and UCF even the week before, USF the week before.
Fuhrman, me, like you, a contrarian, public loads up on a side, typically it's not good for the public. I'm a little concerned, though, in the big house. USC going in, they're coming off a bye. Their rush defense has been really good. I do think the defense is going to be much better than last year. And Alex Orji's getting that first collegiate start. Obviously, he's a guy that they don't trust throwing the football. The number's only 5 now. This is one of those, I'm backing away. I'm staying away from it. If I played my contrarian way, obviously I would take Michigan, but I think USC's better. So it's just a baffling game to me. Where are you right now on USC and Michigan?
I was going to say, if you're trying to make a case for the two biggest contrarian sides, LT, you'd be on an island this weekend because I'm not backing either of them. This being one in a game I know we'll get to in the SEC in a few minutes. You're exactly right, though. You look at this USC team defensively, and they've made leaps and bounds on that side of the ball with the change of defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn. I mean, this was a group that had gone more than 150 games without pitching a shutout like they were able to accomplish going into the bye. Now, I know it was Utah State, but plenty of inferior teams went up and down the field on the Trojans last year to the tune of 34.4 points per game, which was a program worst in terms of points per game allowed. They're just playing smarter football. They're coming downhill. They're not being asked to think as much. They're preventing some of the explosives. But this is a little bit of a different ask. Going on the road, expected to win by margin with with Miller Moss making his debut in a true road environment, an offensive line that's relatively inexperienced. But it's ultimately the Michigan quarterback conundrum. I don't trust Alex Orji to lead this team back. I also don't love the brain drain that we've seen defensively. I don't think Wink Martindale is anywhere close to what Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald were before. All of that being factored in, I still did make a small play going under the total, and I think there's a little bit of value at 44.5 or better because I think Michigan moves at a snail's pace, and I'm not sure USC is looking to try and go out there and be able to put up crooked numbers with an explosive, high-flying passing attack.
So I have a feeling the other contrarian game would be Arkansas and Auburn. Am I close?
That would not be the one that I was highlighting, but it is a perfect place to go because we have seen a battle in the betting market on this game, and it's been fun to watch. Maybe not so much for Auburn fans in terms of what the betting market is telling us, that every time this number gets to 3.5, there is an appetite from professionals to back Arkansas. Now, when we look at the Razorbacks, they, of course, kind of went through the motions in the first quarter against UAB, found another gear. But part of that and what the Arkansas players said, at least on the defensive side, is they went through a full week of practice without their defensive coordinator, and they weren't buttoned up. And they think that led to a little bit of incompetence, so to speak, in getting themselves in the right position. Now you get a full week of focus and practice against an Auburn team that's still trying to figure out exactly what Hank Brown can do against an SEC caliber defense. You look at Auburn and can they show some balance? The strength of this Arkansas defensive front is their D-line. Not a game that I've bet myself, but I fully respect the money that we have seen on the road team at +3 or better.
Todd Fuhrman is BetTheBoardPodcast.com's co-founder. You can find all the games there at BetTheBoardPodcast.com, BetTheBoardPodcast.com. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. He's also on social media at Todd Fuhrman. I'll continue the guessing game. The contrarian game is Florida at Mississippi State, because most of the world is like, how in the world can Florida give anybody in the SEC points on the road? And they're doing that to the tune of 6.
Well, this would be the SEC's definition of a pillow fight that we're going to see. And I think Dan Mullen had the perfect tweet last night saying there is no game on the schedule he's more looking forward to than seeing Florida and Mississippi State, two programs that seem to be floundering, to say the least. And when you look at Florida, there is a bit of a silver lining for me with the Gators. When you consider the 2 games that they have lost this season, that was against top 10 opponents. I think A&M, in my opinion, is only going to get better, and from a defensive standpoint, we know they can stymie you. It almost appeared that Florida wasn't ready for the level of athleticism that Marcel Reed brought to the table, and of course the game against Miami in the season opener, you can understand, as it looks like the Canes are a runaway freight train right now. Meanwhile, for Mississippi State, I'm not going to sugarcoat what we saw last week in Starkville against Toledo. This was a Toledo team and a quarterback in Tucker Gleason that went 8 for 23 against UMass the week before. He looked like the greatest coming of a college quarterback at the mid-major level, a la Ben Roethlisberger at Miami of Ohio, the way he carved up the Bulldogs last week. I expect Mississippi State to get better, but this is a team that I had rated one of the lowest in the Power 4 conferences coming into the year. They did not disappoint in that regard last week. I think Florida, if they still want to play for their head coach, which remains to be seen, is the only way to look in this game, although it is scary to lay nearly a touchdown with the Gators on the road in conference.
Well, because I threw you USC Michigan, I'll throw you the other one, and we know how lopsided the action's going to be on Tennessee, Oklahoma. The interesting thing is the numbers coming down. I don't think this Oklahoma team is great, but still you're getting a touchdown at home. I know you can't be talked into it. I can be talked into taking Oklahoma at home because I think Tennessee's really good, Fuhrman, but I don't know how good the back end of their defense is.
You know, one thing I failed to mention when we broke down Michigan USC is how much that number has adjusted from where it was during the summer. Michigan was right around an 11-point favorite in that game, so you're talking about more than a 2-touchdown change before we even get to October. Now, the line move on this game from where it was during the summer, not nearly as pronounced, but still noticeable, knowing that Oklahoma came into the summer as a 3.5-point favorite, but given the Vols' offensive explosion through the first 3 games, odds makers have been forced to adjust. And when we look at what Tennessee is doing offensively, I know it hasn't come against elite-level competition by any stretch of the imagination. This is still a Tennessee team that has 1,918 total yards, the most through 3 games since 2016. Why is that year notable? Because the 2 teams that put up gaudier offensive stats through the first 3 games have NFL MVPs, or did. Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech and Lamar Jackson's Louisville team at that time. Now, Tennessee, to your point, defensively not been challenged, but honestly, guys, I'm not sure that Oklahoma can challenge them with a vertical passing game. When you look at how banged up the receiver room has been, I do expect Nick Anderson to make his season debut. Deion Burks, the transfer from Purdue, has been an underneath threat. But that offensive line is a major concern, and that's the area where Tennessee was known to have strength, especially with James Pierce coming into the year. I respect the money that's come in on Oklahoma every time the number gets to 7 and even 7.5. But just watching these teams, my eyes tell me something very different, that SEC football, as we know, at the level that Tennessee is recruited at, a far cry from where Oklahoma is at this point. But I can't go against my numbers here. I mean, I make the game 6.5, so I'm not backing Oklahoma, but I would not be shocked at all if Tennessee is able to run away and hide in this particular contest.
LT's made a case that this game has probably the biggest impact on the playoff race, and that's Utah and Oklahoma State. And I'm just interested in this contest on if Cam Rising is playing, and if Cam Rising does play, is he still the second best quarterback in this game?
It's a great question in terms of Cam Rising's status, and the betting market normally knows first. the betting market has no clue in terms of his overall availability, because when you look at the way that this game moved when it opened up on Sunday and Monday, you had a very influential betting group come in and support Utah and the over in this game, flip the favorite from Oklahoma State, who opened as a 2.5, 3-point favorite, to Utah minus 2.5. Total ticked up from 51.5 as high as 54. Well, in the middle of the week, you saw storylines start to emerge that might not be the case, and we're now back to Oklahoma State being a short home favorite. Total hasn't come all the way down, as it's hovering in that 52.5, 53.5 range. But I'll make the case that I actually think Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's younger brother, a 4-star recruit, gives Utah a little bit more of a dynamic threat under center in a road game like this. We saw Oklahoma State really struggle to contain Taylon Green's legs and his passing ability when Arkansas went in there. And while the Razorbacks lost that game by 8 points in overtime, they were no doubt the dominant side in terms of yards per play and the offense that was able to move up and down the field. I look at Alan Bowman and Cam Rising, both in their 7th year of college football. We know a lot of people go to college for 7 years. They typically get medical degrees, though, as a result of all of that. And for me, what's going to happen in this spot is Utah will sell out to bottle up Ollie Gordon, and Ken Bowman make the plays that he's been a little bit inconsistent on in the past. For me, you guys are right. This will go a long way in the pecking order in the Big 12 and the national landscape. If Isaac Wilson officially gets to start for Utah, I'd be inclined to back the Utes and go over the total. If we do see Cam Rising, I'd love the number to flip and back Oklahoma State. The storylines out of Salt Lake were that Cam couldn't grip the football with a cut on his finger, and we'll figure out exactly if he's able to do that on Saturday. But I prefer a compromised Cam Rising than I would a healthy Isaac Wilson to back the vote.
Bionic finger. How about that?
Todd Fuhrman, BetTheBoardPodcast.com. Before Lance asks you NFL, Keith, with a weekly tradition now, wanting an off-the-radar game from you. You got us an off-the-radar game?
Well, the off-the-radar game last week crashed and burned. We got the best of the number there, but UMass didn't get the memo, losing that game by 31 points.
Yes.
So can only go one way but up for Keith this particular week. And when we look to go kind of off the radar with some of the matchups that are out there, I'm not sure if this one is fully off the radar. It's Virginia on the road at Coastal Carolina. I think this is a full class difference for me. And while I'm always reluctant to lay points with Tony Elliott on the road, especially against a G5 opponent, I think Virginia much more dynamic offensively. I think the Cavs defense takes a step forward, and they've kind of been a buy-on team for me over the last couple weeks. Didn't have them last week. The betting market loved them against Maryland. I think they get right here. I'll lay the 3.5 with Virginia on the road at lovely Coastal Carolina.
Fuhrman, I am fascinated by the game in New Orleans this weekend with the Eagles, who should be undefeated right now. And look, I had the Falcons on Monday night. I don't know where you were on that game, but if they just get the first down, if Saquon catches that, falls to the ground, the game's over. The Falcons cover, the Eagles win. With all that said, the Saints have been dominant through 2 weeks, and I think this is one of these games that I lean Eagles right now. But if the Saints win this game going away, you're going to be like, oh, there was so much value just laying 3 at home. And I don't know. Are the Saints really as good as people are billing them right now?
Well, you mentioned contrarian angles and how we typically gravitate towards those. If you've had that mindset in the NFL, you are having a tremendous first 2 weeks of the campaign when you look at how big underdogs have performed up until last night, where the Patriots kind of stubbed their toe. And this is the age-old question, because when you look at current form, and it's very limited with Philadelphia and New Orleans, this number may appear short given the 2 data points we have for both teams so far this season. But when we look at a bigger picture and we start to factor in some of our priors, we've seen this market completely flip, where Philadelphia was listed as a 2.5, 3-point favorite before we saw the Eagles lose to the Falcons and the Saints go out there and absolutely obliterate the Cowboys. Now, New Orleans' offense has no doubt taken the league by storm so far. When you look at a team that scored on 16 of their 21 drives so far this season, it's the highest rate at 76.2% by any team through 2 games dating back to 2000, and that includes the Saints taking their foot off the accelerator because they've had such comfortable leads. 5 touchdowns and 300 yards in the first half against Dallas. Definitely eye-opening. The angle I took in this game wasn't trying to figure out the market and if it's overcorrected. It's banking on the Saints' offense to continue humming on all cylinders. Bet them over their first half First half team total at 12.5 and 13. I think this Eagles defense is in for a long afternoon, but I just want to trust the Saints offense because I still have questions about what we'll see from them defensively.
All right, all the games right there at bettheboardpodcast.com, at bettheboardpodcast.com, and you can follow him on social media at Todd Fuhrman. He was the first one to tell us Bama and Georgia open as a pick. You can find it at other places at different numbers, but right there at Circus Sports, big limits as a pick there. So we'll see how that goes over the next week. We'll talk about that game with him next Friday. Fuhrman, thank you very much for the time. Enjoy the games this weekend.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Best of luck this weekend at the window, and happy trails, Rockstar. Won't be the same without you, my friend.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right, see you, Fuhrman. Fuhrman with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.